A warm welcome to all of you again. And thanks for joining in the discussion today. What we would like to discuss today is basically on a couple of things. One, as more and more enterprises are going towards a multi cloud adoption, what we would like to discuss threadbare is different facets of multi-cloud adoption and what are the challenges involved and how sort of CIOs are looking at mitigating these challenges and going at multi-cloud adoption. Uh, the ultimate aim is we would like to see if we can see certain best practices emerge out of discussion, which enterprises should follow. And by enterprises, predominantly the panel today consists of CIOs from BFSI segment as well as retail segment. But I presume many of the issues are vertical agnostic and they apply to any domain. Just for an introduction, we are joined today by GM Shenoy from National Stock Exchange. We are Renu. She's from a leading international bank. We have Arvind Singh from Future Retail. Then we have KV Deepu from Bajaj Alliance, and we have Ritesh Gupta. He's from Nutanix. We would like to primarily take it from the enterprise user aspect, since the majority of the panelists are from the CIO community, enterprise community. But since we are represented by a vendor and service provider in Ritesh, what we would also like is to get a viewpoint, both in terms of mutual expectations between the OEM and the CIOs regarding the multi-cloud challenges. So first, as a step, the first question, and I would like to put this question to Mr. Shenoy. In the current situation, if we look at especially the last 6 8 months, how businesses have been functioning, a lot of operations have moved to a kind of a work from home or remote kind of mode. So what this remote kind of mode basically means, the pattern of existing workloads have also changed. So the question is, once this pattern of workloads have changed, has it sort of accelerated this shift towards a multi-cloud environment? Have we seen more and more adoption of a hybrid multi-cloud environment amongst enterprises? And if so, what are, other than work from home, what are the primary drivers behind this shift, you think, Mr. Shenoy?
Thank you. Thank you, Rajnish. Thank you, everybody. So, I mean, of course, primarily, the work from home has been the focal point of driving cloud adoption. And, for many enterprises, the other focal point has been the economics part. I mean, in this period of time, you would like to have more of OPEX expenditure rather than CAPEX. So that is why the foray to the cloud would be a point which has been taken up by most of the enterprises. In case of the National Stock Exchange, we had a strong, infrastructure internally, which was responsible for our cloud this thing. We had all our internal cloud is on hyper-converged infrastructure. And of course, as far as the multi-cloud thing is concerned, we are burstable on public cloud. The public cloud's basic problems, which, I mean, Rajnish, you mentioned also, that we'll come to it later on, there are issues of, data ownership, there are issues of security, there are issues of, cloud access, etc. But, the essential point to note is that while the work from home drove the cloud necessity, and economics is a strong criterion. Today, of course, it is become an essential thing to look for services which can be offered by multi-cloud vendors rather than depending either internally on your own internal cloud or a set of fixed participants. I mean, we ourselves have worked with of course the ubiquitous Microsoft cloud for Office 365 is what we work with. We also work with Amazon. We also work with other cloud providers depending on the infrastructure and application which we would put on. Most of the work has been from a infrastructure as a service, but we are also looking at platform as a service. Cloud software as a service as such has been limited to CRM and other things only. So this is broadly in a nutshell what I would see as the environment currently, which is driving us to a multi-cloud environment. And would leave it to you, Rajnish, to moderate with the other people and get their views also on how it is going in their area.
Okay, thank you. You have touched upon, we will discuss these in more details. Couple of issues here you mentioned. One was about the economics part of it, and the other was when you gave that NSA example that you are using the ubiquitous Microsoft Cloud you mentioned. So we will talk about that. I'll come to you, Renu. Now, your experience, you have experienced both as a service provider as and an enterprise user. This economics part, what I'd like to know, we realize that enterprises are looking at more and more hybrid cloud as they are moving from an capex to an opex model. My question is, are there very strongly measurable matrices to sort of successfully check these how these economics are managed, the economics of scale for enterprises are managed? Are there measurable matrices for it?
Okay, first of all, my views on the cloud adoption itself. So if you look at, say, 2-3 years back when we were saying that cloud, organizations, especially in banking and financial services, are wary of using cloud because of the security reason, I think we have been past that. So there is usage of cloud, private, public, hybrid, hosted, private, etc. So now the challenge is because there are internal production applications in any enterprise, as well as vendor hosted applications, there are a variety of clouds. Clouds offered by vendors, clouds subscribed by us, our internal, enterprise cloud. So there are a variety of clouds, and which again include public, private, and hybrid. So when you talk about multi-cloud, right, I differentiate it against the hybrid cloud. By multi-cloud, I expect a provider to actually act as an aggregator and take away all my heterogeneous instances of cloud and offer me an aggregated single environment and be able to integrate and orchestrate it. What are the matrices in that environment? Coming to your question, I would, as a CIO or CTO, I would like to see the optimal cost per transaction. That's the end result I want. And to do so, I can see that, okay, I'm, let's say if I am doing a particular transaction, say an individual taking a transport using a cloud-based application, what is the cost per transaction that I'm incurring today versus if I aggregate all the clouds on a multi-cloud provider across the applications, what is my per transaction cost? And then I would look for ROI on overall initiative, whether if I'm moving from heterogeneous clouds to, say, aggregated multi-cloud, what is the benefit I'm getting by a provider taking away my capex or multiple investments and offering me per transaction based service. So I would like to look at savings, and I would like to look at the cost per transaction as the key matrices.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point you brought in about initially that in a multi-cloud environment, you are looking from the service provider as from the aggregator perspective, and he should orchestrate all type of clouds, and the ultimate outcome should be optimal productivity for that. So that's a nice view, and I'll come to you, Deepu. And my question here is an extension of this area. So once we are talking about this aggregator model of a service provider providing an aggregated model, or even a hybrid cloud scenario, if we are talking out, where there are certain applications which are perhaps on a public cloud, and then there are certain maybe core applications which are more on private cloud. Either they may be hosted by third party data centers or in house. My question is, as a CIO, as an enterprise CIO, what are the challenges involved in reconciling one, these multiple applications in different types of clouds? One, yeah. And the second is, what do you expect, say, from a vendor like Nutanix, who is perhaps performing the role of what Renu says is an aggregator? What are your expectations that he will deliver to you as a CIO?
So from a challenges perspective, I see three challenges. One is, ensuring governance and compliance, because for most companies, there are multiple, compliance requirements, and which need to be met regardless of, where the data resides. So therefore, data governance from that perspective becomes critical. Secondly, I think the lack of, app management, because when you have multi-cloud environments, they make it easy in a way to lose track of, which applications are running where and how much is the cost every day. So I think that again becomes a challenge. Thirdly, spiraling costs. What happens is, you have something known as a cloud sprawl, and the costs associated with each service can quickly spin out of control. Now, coming to expectations from service partners, it's very simple. Just give solutions to all of these.
That's a very fundamental point you mentioned. Before I come to the next CIO on our panel, Arvind, I would like to take a vendor perspective from Ritesh, because you have heard two or three basically point of views coming out here. One, that the CIOs are expecting the service provider to perform a role of an aggregator, then sort of helping them reconcile different applications in different types of clouds. One, from a Nutanix perspective, what I would like to know is, how you are helping the enterprise CIOs in this aspect, and more importantly, Nutanix has recently one of your initiatives has been partnering with the likes of the large public cloud providers like AWS or Azure, and helping enterprises who are using these public cloud platforms to move towards a hybrid or multi-cloud environment. How are those initiatives geared up to help enterprises? So I'd like to put this to Ritesh.
So thanks everybody, and Ritesh, thanks for the question. So Nutanix has been the leader in hyper-converged infrastructure. We used to call it HCI. But over the period of 5 years, Nutanix is in India for the last 5 years, and in the 5 years, we have ourselves transformed the full form of HCI from a hyper-converged infrastructure to a hybrid cloud infrastructure. And when I say that, so recently we have tied up with the likes of AWS and Azure. And we have extended our partnership with these two public cloud providers, which means that we have something called as Nutanix Clusters. Now, that's the same cluster software which was available on-prem. We have now made it available on the two public cloud providers, which is AWS and Azure, and we will have, in the near future, the other two vendors, also the public cloud vendors. So, having said that, now as Renuga said about the kind of an aggregator. So what we today we can offer to the customers. Let's say there's a customer who has set up an on-prem private cloud, and now he wants to have certain workloads on the public cloud. Now dependency can be on the application. Now for certain application, maybe AWS is the right choice. Certain other application, Azure can be the right choice. So from the same console, what we can do is we can provision the workloads either on-prem or on Azure or on AWS. So we are becoming a kind of a virtual aggregator to call it, where you can pick and choose a marketplace. It's like you going to the hotel and you choose a menu card. You want a South Indian menu card, you want a Chinese, or you want a kind of North Indian menu card. So the menu card is available. You as a customer, this is your ROI analysis, this is your workload application dependency. You decide on the public cloud, the choice of public. Secondly, to answer to Mr. Deepu's question about the cost governance, so in the same solution, we have a cost and governance mechanism which was applicable to the on-prem solution. Now we have extended the same to the public cloud, wherein the security aspect is covered. So, for example, we have our SDN solution which runs on-prem, and the same the solution can be extended to AWS. Customers don't have to purchase something else, so that we give a secure tunnel to the customer between an on-prem and a public. So I hope I have answered and touched upon both the questions. So as an aggregator, yes, we give you a hybrid approach to the customer, and we give choice to the customer. I mean, that is super critical. Whether you want on-prem, whether multi-cloud or any multi-cloud, which cloud you want to go.
Okay. Thank you. I'll come back to you later on this. I'll come to Arvind now. The first point is, since you are representing the retail segment and what we know have happened in retail, the physical retail part has been one of the sectors which had some impact, seen some impact of the current situation. And as a result, what we have seen is increase in the e-tailing part, or the online retailing part has increased subsequently in these times. So that also means a lot of the workloads have also changed. So my question is, especially in this current situation, keeping in mind, and from your sector perspective, has this movement towards hybrid cloud or multiple cloud increased? And what have been the main trends that you have seen, trends both in terms of technology trends as well as business challenges you have witnessed in this shift towards multiple cloud?
I think from retail perspective, as you said, it has been a bigger challenge for us specifically. We have been brick and mortar primarily, then digital. So, I would say COVID has been the reason of digital transformation in, legacy retailers like us. Okay. So we have been working on this for last 3-4 years, but I think the real translation or transformation has happened because of COVID. So because of COVID, we have adopted to work from home, which was not a very much appreciated, world for from a legacy company perspective. So performance, the system performance, accessibility, everything has changed. The demand has changed. So instead of being a physical data store, we have now started migrating to multi-cloud world, where you get more flexibility of systems, better accessibility of systems, more secure environment, and then I would say nowadays it's all about innovation. So when you go into a multi-cloud world, you get benefits of different cloud offerings. So that's a great advantage when you switch to a multi-cloud culture. At the same time, challenge, I think the challenge is more about managing the complexity of multi-cloud environment, and the security, I would say, it's at a higher stake.
I just want to add, while many have not gone full scale on multi-cloud, and given that COVID and the current situation has opened up more opportunities for better leveraging multi-cloud, one of the things that retail or financial services and other services sector would do is have better ability to continue moving their workloads based on the consumption pattern from one provider to other, and have that flexibility in the hand.
Yeah.
So you know what are your data analytics needs, you know what are your storage needs, you know what are your AI/ML needs, and different applications which have different consumption patterns, and be able to switch around from one cloud provider to other, or move from one private or public or hybrid cloud from other, using the multi-cloud capability based on your consumption patterns. So that's certainly a big plus. I don't know what level of capability, say, Nutanix would provide in this dimension, but I think that's the key, you can say, criteria if one would like to go for multi-cloud.
I think you rightly was based, like it is more about the flexibility which you would look forward to, and the benefits of different innovations provided by different providers. If I go back a decade back, I guess I was working with RightScale, one of the companies which was more of a facade layer, which used to be cloud agnostic. You can at the back end, you can have Azure or you can have AWS, but all the scripting and scaling up, everything was managed on RightScale layer. So I've used it a decade back. I don't know how Nutanix. I think it might be provide more advantage or a extended advantage than what RightScale used to. But I'm looking forward to those kind of flexibility from any vendor.
Okay, thank you. This is a very interesting point that Renu has brought up. In fact, though my next question was on security and compliance, I'll come to Ritesh once to touch upon this thing. As a service provider, what Renu is saying, does Nutanix has this, because this ultimately needs a lot of not just flexibility, which Arvind is saying, but even managing this sort of complexity uh, in terms of you have to sort of dynamically provision each of these activities in different kind of clouds. Do you help enterprises with these kind of scenario where they can have these different kind of clouds and different kinds of services and applications and provision there?
So being the multi-cloud provider, I mean, the scalability and the automation becomes very, very important, as Renu ma'am also said. So what we have inherent solutions available with Nutanix is the scalability. Let's say, there is a new workload which comes in. I'll give an example, like during Diwali or during an Amazon sale, there is sudden burst in workload, and the customer or the IT team has to provision more virtual machines or more VMs. That is scenario number one. The scenario number two, that which we did for one of the banking customer, is one of the customer was running 200 VDIs on-prem, and suddenly because of the work from home, customer wanted 100 VDIs more in just 1 hour time. And what we did is 100 VDI users. So we provision 100 VDI users more from the AWS within an hour's time. So we have another solution, a VDI solution, and which we made it available for one of the ITS customer in a short span of time. Similarly, there is some other solution. There is a concept of hibernation or hibernating. In case the workload comes down, the usage comes down, we can claw back in such a way that your consumption goes down, your pricing goes down. So all these features, which I said, which is automation, scalability, from one data center of public cloud to the another data center of public cloud. And lastly, the hibernation part. I mean, you have reached a peak. Now the Diwali season is done. You have to come back, pull back, reduce the workload, so that at the end of the day, your ROI, which is super critical, your cost is managed. I mean, that all the solutions are possible with Nutanix solution.
But
Yeah.
is it not default
But
available in any cloud provider? Like in Amazon, also you have this flexibility of upscaling and downscaling.
Yeah. So, Arvindji, what I'm trying to say, Amazon has this option, Azure has this option. But a lot of customers still like SAP. Since you come from retail, a lot of customers have still put SAP on-prem. They have not put SAP on the public cloud. But there might be a situation where certain modules of SAP, it can be APO, supply chain, BW, they may want to put it on public cloud or some module of SAP which they want to burst it to public cloud. In that case, then this hybrid or the multi-cloud approach becomes important.
Okay. Okay.
And that automation, if the customer is expecting and is investing in that, then he better gets that particular option to get that automation piece as well as scalability.
just one more point I'd like to understand. See, what basically Renu had mentioned was this dynamic provision is depending on your consumption pattern of the enterprise. And so, one is it's obviously being done on the fly. And as you correctly mentioned, there are different reasons how this consumption workload will also change. It can be seasonal, like Diwali,
Yeah.
or various other reasons. So,
Yes.
how geared up are the CIOs or enterprises to do these dynamic provisioning as per their fast changing consumption patterns?
It depends on multiple things. One is the capability of the tool, product vendor, the solution that you have. Another is your need itself. And then finally, it depends on how quickly on demand you have access to the matrix. Because if I figure out my consumption pattern is changing, and my need for certain applications in certain periods is higher or lower, then I plan my deployment on certain clouds accordingly. So my question would be that when you say how prepared the CIOs community are in leveraging this deployment based on consumption pattern, my question would be that how instantaneous and on demand the availability of the matrix is for leveraging such feature.
Thank you. Got it. Understand. So I'll come back to the couple of very critical points, especially for BFSI. So I'll come to you, Mr. Shenoy, regarding the two biggest issues are security and compliance, especially for BFSI, and with an increasing remote working environment in the recent months, the cybersecurity vulnerabilities have increased manifold. So, in a typical multi-cloud or hybrid cloud scenario that we are talking out, how would you advise, especially BFSI organizations and all enterprises in general, to sort of mitigate these cybersecurity challenges? And again, now almost every organization is global, so you're working with different conforming to different compliances from different geographies. So how would you also advise CIOs to look at these compliance conformances?
Yeah, actually, I mean, for BFSI and more particularly our type of organization, security and compliance are much on a much higher degree than dynamic provisioning on a burstable basis. So in a sense, first of all, the data residency. We choose clouds which have local data centers. Because data residency is very important for us. I mean, one of the first criteria which we look for is that our data should be governed by the Indian laws and should be resident in India. Especially personally identifiable information. We have to see that it is protected properly, And in that sense, we take all care to ensure that such information is not available on foreign, soil and, out of our control. So I think it is, both this compliance part and this thing is of importance to us in that, while, it may be okay for CRM type of data to be, utilized in an application which may not be resident within the country, but, for data which is paramount to our business and especially, of our customers, etc., it is important that it is resident within the country. We have the control and we have the security controls within our means also. So, we can go into depth on this also. But, even with vendors like Microsoft also, the encryption keys, there are multiple mechanisms by which they offer you facility of holding the keys or, holding the keys in a, storage vault under your control, etc. So, Rajnish, I agree, that as far as we are concerned, which is why, even to this day, our own internal cloud hosts a large part of our information, and, the other information wherein, we are utilizing the other cloud, we take care to see the data residency part, the security control, etc. And it is not that, a decision is made ad hoc to, put our data on any cloud, which is why, while, for a development sort of environment, a burstable sort of, mechanism is acceptable. But for, our production thing, I think, it is more of a static decision than a dynamic decision, which is there.
Okay, thank you. I'll extend this question to Deepu, especially since the insurance sector has a lot of provisions for these compliances and also securities, as usual, very highly critical there. So, what are your views on the challenges on the cybersecurity and compliance front, and how would you advise CIOs to go by in this aspect?
So, firstly, I think to the point that was discussed, we obviously need to adhere to the regulations in terms of the presence of data. It has to be hosted within India, and we have to follow all the regulatory norms. That is a basic which goes without saying. Coming to your query on what are some of the best practices, one of course is to design what we call a future-proof strategy. We need to start by deciding which are the areas of business which will benefit from the cloud, and then very clearly define the benefits, because a lot of stakeholders, when the cost goes back to them, they'd like to know what are the tangible benefits. And when we focus on the entire migration journey, it's better to delineate them right upfront. We need to be clear about the metrics. Is it about improving operational excellence? Is it to save on cost per transaction, or is it to accelerate delivery speed? So I think we need to get that right. Second is to the point that I made earlier, right? Avoid cloud sprawl. Most people use multiple cloud services and providers, right? And like I said, it leads to this situation. If it is not controlled on time, companies may end up, unwittingly, losing money, right? Because you could have, unrequited cloud resources. And to avoid this, we need to plan the infrastructure carefully. We need to tread carefully. Thirdly, coming specifically to your point around data security, it goes without saying that this has always been a bit of an existential question, as far as on-prem versus cloud is concerned. And I think a lot of measures have been taken by various cloud providers. So in a way, it's something which you kind of take for granted, when you move to the cloud. The other is, given that hyper automation is one of the areas of focus today, is to clearly plan for it, because it obviously allows you to move workloads from one cloud environment to another. It also helps you balance loads, especially if you have multiple assets in the environment. So I think a focus on these 5 aspects: regulatory adherence, future-proof strategy, avoiding cloud sprawl, very clear focus on data security, and planning for automation opportunities. I think these 5, if planned well and implemented well, can go a long way in a smooth migration and successful deployment over a long period of time.
The next point is about what we are seeing is a lot of enterprises are going for increasing containerization, both in terms of applications as well as services. And it helps in sort of regarding many of these microservices, you can sort of add, manage. I'll keep this question open to all the panelists, and any one of you can answer. What, as a CIO, are the main challenges when you are sort of automating these applications, these containerized based applications, which are becoming very popular now, or these microservices, managing these microservices? What are the biggest challenges from a CIO perspective?
So containerization actually, in the bank context, we have seen is to offer more flexibility and higher security. And in bank context, mostly I have seen use of the internal private cloud. I really do not have a view into multi-cloud and containerization. Maybe colleagues can pitch in.
So
Uh,
what I can do is just because I have seen one of the bank recently adopted a containerized kind of a deployment for I think a treasury application. So when I met the CIO and his team, and what top three things if I would have to say, uh, you know, the CIOs have to think about. Number one is the right use case, and what will be the outcome? I mean, is the TPS transaction per second will be better? I mean, obviously, no more transactions per second, or is it the the turnaround time to market that will come down? Is it the capex, the hardware or the software requirement will come down? That is one. Point number two is the choice of the container application. There are so many applications available today. There are OEMs who give a containerized application. There are open source available. So which is the right, container platform which you have to select? And obviously the application, the end application. So which I say when I said the treasury app. So is that treasury app certified or supported on that container platform is super critical. And lastly, which is the number one, which I feel for can become a pain point later if not thought about, is the enablement and skill sets of the operations team. Because today the operations team, which when I see as a OEM, are still living in the legacy world. You know, the old 3-tier architecture, app, web, and DB, and you have a kind of monolithic application. Whereas this is a microservices based application. So the enablement, the skill sets, and the mindset change is super critical. And so this is a live experience of one of the bank I've seen during COVID time, just 3 months back. And so I just thought I'll share with him.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to add anything on these containerized applications or these microservices?
I would like to add the need for monitoring of threats, monitoring of performance against SLAs, and the use of automation tools in the context of containerization come multi-cloud.
Okay. Thank you. In fact, SLAs would be one area we would discuss towards the end. My next question is around what we are seeing emerging as a practice is the concept of shadow IT, and especially for agile or DevOps driven organizations, this concept of shadow IT is sort of increasing. So maybe I'll put this question to Deepu in terms of what are the sort of best practices that are emerging as far as shadow IT adoption in enterprises are concerned?
Yeah, so if you look at it from a shadow IT perspective, right? I mean, what are the typical challenges? Challenges are, one is end-to-end encryption and decryption. Second is securing APIs. Third is stringent cybersecurity policies. And fourthly, integrated security for multiple vendors, especially when they're working simultaneously on a project. So if you look at the solutions to these, right, coming to end-to-end encryption and decryption, especially today, now that it's a complete digital way of working, I think the range of tools, which have been used, right, whether it is data at rest or data in motion, It's an experienced panel out here, so I don't even need to go into those tools. That is something, which is today very much part and parcel of the toolkit of any organization. As far as securing APIs is concerned, we are today in an API economy, right? I mean, that is how a lot of business happens. So today, when you look at a lot of state-of-the-art tools, they come in with inbuilt encryption layers for APIs. So that's how, it's been taken to the next level. As far as cybersecurity is concerned, just one thing I want to mention, going back to the point earlier, that while a lot of firms will focus on tools and, how do we monitor 24/7 SOC, so on and so forth, I think the key here is the user. We just need to make sure that we continuously educate our users, because if you see typically, where issues have happened, it's not because the tool has failed as much as, maybe users making some basic mistakes. So I think we shouldn't forget the human part of the equation out here. I think that's an extremely important one. And lastly, coming to integrated security for multiple vendors working simultaneously, it goes without saying that when we do a due diligence, sometimes what happens is there is tremendous pressure to get going immediately, because it is the need of the hour. I think if you're not able to, if you don't compromise on that, and then I think if you ensure that you're right on top, it goes a long way in ensuring that you don't have any major challenges going forward. So this is basically from my own experience in terms of what challenges we have faced and what solutions we've implemented.
I'll extend this question to Mr. Shenoy also in terms of shadow IT best practices emerging, and specifically from BFSI perspective, what are your thoughts?
So basically, like shadow IT is good for business, but bad for IT and security. I mean, ideally, like business would like to get it done faster and through any mechanism possible, and not go through a centralized route. So shadow IT has been a problem with us before the cloud inception also, in that, like there were a lot of applications which were developed by third-party vendors with possible minimal intervention of the centralized IT function. But, I mean, both centralized IT and security frowns at shadow IT. So some of the controls, were already discussed, in terms of data at rest, data in motion being encrypted, having two-factor authentication, source code, verification, tools like, which do source code analysis to find out flaws, etc. So now what we have done is, that irrespective of, how the business wants it, it can be a third party vendor also, but nevertheless, the IT team is involved, and the centralized security team is also involved in it. I don't know, there is one new terminology. I'll say that I am also much ignorant about it, but in the cloud area, there is something called as the cloud access service broker, which is there, and which promises to provide lot of focus to the security organization about what type of applications are in the cloud, what is the assets which are in the cloud, and what type of controls are there. So I'm also, I would say I'm ignorant about that, but that is something which our security and we also are looking at in a big way as far as the shadow IT in cloud is concerned.
Arvind, I would like to ask you if you can throw some light on the cloud service broker concept and the overall shadow IT concept that we are talking about. If you can add some.
Shadow IT, I think, as panelists touched on, it has pros and cons. It has benefits for a business and it has some cons for technology. So you talk about security aspects, access control, all those things become challenge when you talk about a shadow IT, perspective. But from business perspective, it's more efficient way of doing things. It does bring more efficiency and more productivity among employees. That's my take. But as one of our panelists said, the security aspects has to be taken care of, data in motion, data in rest, access controls, all those things, taken care of when you are having applications from multiple third-party vendors.
I would like to add my viewpoint.
Yeah.
Whether you use the term shadow IT or not, what are we referring to? We are referring to an application being developed and deployed with formal concurrence approval of a central organization versus it being deployed by, you can say, a smaller unit or without CIO organization's concurrence, correct? So, and it could include data, application, cloud, networks, etc., everything else together. So how one could do it, I mean, and without causing the damage that a shadow IT could cause. You want to use the best of it, but at the same time, not let it cause damage to the organization. So what you must do, there are areas which are required in IT governance. Things like how do you ensure global information security? How do you ensure data governance? How do you ensure compliance and any remediations or security and use of tools or UI UX compliance or compliance with, say, data security and Disability Act and various other things which a CIO organization may enforce. So as long as you are meeting those and those guidelines are common for you to do centralized IT versus decentralized or shadow IT, as long as you are following those basics, you are good. So that's how I look at it.
So my next question, and we are coming towards the end, is a very critical part which we briefly touched upon once, is about the SLAs and conforming to these SLAs. And here we are talking about scenarios, especially the current situation where there are certain changes in workloads and the consumption patterns, and maybe some of the existing SLAs which were sort of formed or which were initially designed keeping in mind a certain consumption pattern, and organizations have to dynamically adapt to the current situation. When we are talking about this shifting towards multiple cloud and some of the concepts we talked about, what are the challenges in regarding conforming to SLAs? And first, I would like to ask all the CIOs, what are your expectations from the service providers, and how do you sort of hold them accountable for maintaining those SLAs? So maybe Renu, you can start.
Okay, so my expectation would be, so your question is specifically is that my workloads are changing and I have certain cloud providers with whom I have undergone certain SLAs. Exactly. And I have a multi-cloud provider who has kind of aggregated across these cloud providers, because that provider is actually representing, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, and everybody else. And I do have existing SLAs based on my existing patterns. So my expectation out of the provider would be that, one, that you keep giving me the metrics on my consumption patterns and guide me how I can shift my load from a particular cloud to other. Another is that how likely I am to meet those SLAs, or where there could be breach against certain SLAs based on the current performance that I'm seeing, and issue me a guidance based on the metrics, that I'm actually needing a 99.9% adherence or uptime, etc., versus I currently have 95%. So that kind of guidance also should come, and it should be possible to move from one provider to other, or even change service level agreement within the existing provider through this multi-cloud provider. I call them as, let's say, aggregator.
Okay, thank you. Deepu, you would like to add something on the SLAs?
Yeah. So if you look at it, see, the whole reason for moving to the cloud, right, is flexibility, right? And you also look at, efficiency. And especially as you have, more SaaS and PaaS products coming in, right? You're looking at how do you optimize workload, reduce cost of IT infrastructure, and also during peak time, how do you look at scalability and reliability? So adding on to what my co-panelist said, for me, if you look at SLAs, it's about how do you raise the bar on basically 3 points, apart from, of course, looking at your basic monitoring of metrics. One is sourcing, right? Because the desire is to basically, increase agility. And while when we take a decision, it's driven by a variety of factors, right? We look at availability, performance, data sovereignty, regulatory requirements, labor costs, right? So on and so forth. So how can we get going on that front? Second is from an architectural point of view, right? Because today applications are by design, more modular. So how can we, span multiple cloud providers? And also, how can we look at consuming services from multiple clouds? So that is the second aspect. Third, and most importantly, this I think lies at the heart of any discussion that we do, is on governance. Because when we ensure operational control, right, we also want to unify administration and monitoring of our various systems. And also, we'd like to use this to standardize our policies, procedures, processes, and also look at how do we leverage tools there. Tools which can help us, enable cost governance and optimization across multiple providers. So from my perspective, based on, whatever experience we have had, apart from the basic metrics, these are the three areas where we'd like to raise the bar.
Thank you. Ritesh, I'd come to you. Now you have heard the expectations from the CIOs in terms of from a service provider. How would a service provider like Nutanix look at meeting some of these expectations?
Okay. The way I would put at it is we go step by step. And when I say step by step, is first we would want to understand, why multi-cloud or why customer, if let's say the customer is running something on-prem, then why do you want to put out multi-cloud? Now that SLA can be one of the reason. It can be scalability. It can be immediate availability because customers don't want to wait for 4 to 5 weeks for hardware. It can be an ROI. And today, like when we speak to a lot of CIOs, ROI becomes very important point today. Like one example I'll give you. I can't obviously name the customer. There's a customer in Bangalore, and what happened in the month of April when COVID started, he put 4,000 VDIs on Azure immediately within 10 days. So what was the positive side is in 10 days, 4,000 VDIs were made live on Azure. In the month of April, then he got a bill from Azure or whatever that bill he got, the monthly bill. And that monthly bill started, compounding. And when he called us in the month of September saying, now COVID is there to stay. Now I want to have a midterm to a long-term roadmap. And when we did an ROI analysis for the customer, believe me, the on-prem was becoming 71% better than a public cloud. So again, the first step, what we today do is the right choice of workload, the ROI analysis, and what is the outcome customer is expecting from you, number one. Point number two, basis the outcome, then have a proper cloud strategy for the CIO so that the CIO, so we become a kind of a spokesperson for CIO where we outline the cloud strategy, which involve the governance part, the security part, so that the CIO can take it to the board. That is the vision for the particular organization. The third part would be the hurdles which will come. If let's say the CIO goes ahead with that particular the concept, yes, we have to go with public cloud or a multi-cloud option. Then what are the hurdles anybody will face in that digital transformation or the cloud journey? And last part, again, which I've already said in my previous response, is preparing for the journey. When I say preparing for the journey, it is changing the people mindset because obviously there are still, the customers at the ground level, like the IT administrators, they want control of their data. They want control of everything. So the change in people mindset and the people skills. So this is the way we try to guide, our customers in their journey because gone are the days when we go to the customer and say, hey, customer, we have so much CPU, so much RAM, so much of capacity. Today, the customers are more educated than OEM, believe me. And when we have to meet the customer, obviously, as an OEM, our duty is to give them incremental information, give them the expectation on what are the business benefits rather than telling them these are the technical benefits. I mean, that is what I would want to say.
Got it. Thanks. So before we conclude, and we will have a last question for each of the panelists. Before that, very briefly, if I may sum up the sort of the main things we discussed about the changing pattern of workloads. We discussed about dynamic provisioning as per the consumption pattern. We discussed about the economics and the ROI. We discussed about shadow IT in terms of having a decentralized IT versus a centralized IT. We talked about containerized applications and microservices architecture. We talked about security and compliances. What I would like now, each of the panelists very briefly to mention one large trend or practice, if I may say, towards multi-cloud adoption, which you would predict would happen in the Indian scenario over the next 6 to 12 months. So I'll start with you, Mr. Shenoy.
As I said, our thing from a multi-cloud thing is more of, applications rather than anything else. It is not that, like we wanted to have a multi-cloud strategy per se, but, the applications, like they say, horses for courses, So multiple applications have had multiple scenarios in which they had, different cloud environments to work on. Like a website is in a different environment, office is in a different environment. Our own internal cloud supports multiple things. Essentially, what I would say is, even from our organization, what parameters are important, for an especially a financial services organization, whether it is our own cloud or other multiple clouds which is there. Our two I would say factors, or like you said, SLA factors, which we look at is basically availability and continuity. Availability in terms of that when we want it should be available for the application and for the data access part which is there, and continuity, because business continuity is an important factor for financial services organization. So how do they manage replication? How do they manage the continuity part? What sort of co-located other entities are available where we can utilize the services, etc. So this, I think, sums up what we have as a strategy for multi-cloud access.
Okay, thank you, Renu. If I may ask you, what would you feel the most important best practice emerge?
Trend, if I summarize in one word, is Uberization. And the expectation or where the industry is evolving and what I'm expecting from multi-cloud provider is orchestration and integration are the keywords I will use.
Thank you. Arvind?
From my perspective, I think it's more about automation and innovation. Get the best of services available from various cloud providers without any hindrance. A lot of hindrance, in managing it.
Okay, Deepu?
I think we already covered all the points, Rajnish. But if I were to just put it in 3 words, it'll be hyper automation, it'll be availability, and security. I think these 3 things will come to define the environment going forward.
That's lovely. And Ritesh, you have the last word.
I've already covered everything. So for a moment, I'll remove my advisory hat. I'll put a sales hat. Nutanix can meet all the expectations. But yeah, on the serious note, we may say a lot of things that we can do, automation, scalability. But at the end of the day, if we can be relevant to a customer and meet their pain points and a better commercials, end of the day, commercials do matter, whether it is on-prem or public cloud or a hybrid cloud. And if we can be relevant to the end business, I mean, that is the whole aim of IT today. Be relevant or be a kind of a profit center rather than being a cost center to the business. And if we can be relevant, I'm happy to support the customers in their journey. That's all I.
Thank you. So thanks a lot for all the panelists for sparing your time. And I hope the discussion has been enhancing and sort of even though you are already experts, but even some of the best practices that we have talked can be sort of applied in your workplaces also. And thanks again for such an enriching discussion. And as we already mentioned, this recording, it will be shown on 11th of November at 3 p.m. and it will be witnessed by 100 CIOs. So I'm sure all these discussions would be useful for many of them, and hopefully, if they are successfully able to apply them at their workplaces, that will be ultimate measure of success of this panel discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
Thank you, Shanwar sir. Thanks for your
thank you, thank you,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.